how long you sit on the toilet after you're done. That's called the wrap-up time. And we can measure that as well. And so we can give you, your trends on that. And are you sitting there for 15 minutes scrolling on your phone, just passing time? Like, there are more comfortable places to do that that won't put undue stress on your anal rectal muscles.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Scott, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. For those without context, this will be the shittiest podcast you listen to today, but we mean that in the best way, and Scott will give context. But before we do on Scott and Throne and everything you're doing, how would you describe yourself?
Andrew, thanks so much for having me on. I would say I'm a lively entrepreneur.
Yeah, I can see that. I had the pleasure of meeting Scott at Whoop HQ when he was giving a TED Talk at TEDx Boston, Unlocking Longevity, talking about Whoop. I think people are familiar with all the wearable and all the data we're capturing. But Scott noticed a problem that we're flushing away, throwing away potentially even more powerful, insightful, and impactful data. And that's kind of his story. So I'll let you just kind of give some context on who you are, what Throne is, and how you ended up building what you're building right now.
I'm Scott Hickle. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Throne. We're building the first device to track gut health, urinary function, bathroom habits, hydration from your toilet automatically, hands-free with every flush. Basic insight behind this is, as you'd alluded to, there are dozens of devices to track sleep, exercise, cardio, respiratory rate, and dozens of other continuous biomarkers. There's nothing looking at gut health, urinary function, hydration, bathroom habits, these trends on a daily basis, despite the fact that there are two places that every single person goes every single day: their bed and their toilet. And we can do a great job of tracking sleep and do an awful job of tracking gut health. And that realization is ultimately what spurred developing Throne, which is a continuous gut health monitor. And so we got here because I was raised by two doctors.
Me too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So birds of a feather. But my dad's a medical device inventor as well. And my mom's a geriatrician. And so my co-founder, Tim, I have two co-founders. One is Tim, who originally had the idea. And he first pitched this to me 4 years ago as kind of a joke. But, he'd been thinking about this abstract notion of smart toilets since college. And, I was like, clearly you would name that company Throne. And fast forward, the name stuck. It became one of those recurring topics of conversation between he and I. And about a year and a half later, we called my mom. And I was like, hey, Mom, is there any medical utility to looking at people's waste? And she lit up. She was like, honey, in the field of geriatrics, it is a joke that all our patients care about is their kids, their meds, and their poop. And it's so common that my patients bring in unsolicited stool samples for me to look at, or they text me pictures of their poop. I have stopped giving my phone number to my patients because they'll send me so many pictures of their poop. And that was the first time we were like, wait a second, there might actually be something here. If people can intuitively appreciate the value of health insight hidden in their waste, because they're sending it to their doctor. So clearly they appreciate that there's medical utility here. And then the second thing is that it's so common that it's changed the way she as a physician communicates with her patients. Yeah. So that was the original spark that caused us to look into this. And ultimately the realization was there are hundreds of millions of Americans alone who would benefit from taking a closer look at the toilet bowl.
Can we pause there for a second? And for most people listening, it may be obvious, but for anyone not, and maybe I'm overestimating this, the importance of gut health and the microbiome. So there's an example of people say, hey, it's not actually us making decisions. It's our microbiota that it's making us want things or act in certain ways, and just how much of our biomass is made up by things that aren't our cells, they're bacteria and others, but also
Mm-hmm.
I think more and more research coming out like on doing fecal transplants where you can make a rat act schizophrenic or make them stop acting schizophrenic based on transferring healthy or unhealthy fecal matter. And so
Mm-hmm.
this importance of, it's not just, hey, do I have a stomach ache? Hey, do I have IBS? There's a lot happening in gut health that I think we're only recently in recent years becoming aware of. Can you speak to that and just how maybe this has always been important, but we're understanding that importance more now than ever?
So the gut microbiome is very much a emerging field of health. And to be very clear, what Throne is measuring is not the direct health of your gut microbiome so much as a proxy to the health of your microbiome, right? Like there are microbiome tests you can take, but that requires DNA and RNA sequencing. You have to collect a sample, send it off to a lab. And we think of ourselves as what Whoop and Aura are to a blood test, we are to a microbiome test, right? Which is you're getting a dozen biomarkers every single day as opposed to, a full panel, but a
Right.
snapshot in time. That said, the microbiome science is like really exciting, really interesting. So much of our metabolic health, of our gut health, is driven by the balance of different microbes in our gut that we are starting to understand. But the reality is, our understanding is not quite to the point where it's that clinically helpful outside of a few isolated instances. So, and the reason for that is that we as humans love linear relationships. We like to reduce things in the universe down to linear relationships that are easy to understand. More of this is good, less of that is bad. And the gut microbiome is a multivariate, dynamic, compensatory system where there are some examples of microbes that are like, obviously, if you have too much of these, it's bad. Or if you have a lot of this, it's good, right? Like Akkermansia is the good microbe that everyone likes to talk about. You have too much E. coli or C. difficile, Clostridium difficile. That can hospitalize you. That's terrible. However, for the most part, it's hard to say this is the right amount of this microbe to have because just because you don't have that microbe doesn't mean you're not making up for the same functional effects with a symphony of 20 other microbes working in unison to
Right.
achieve the same function, which is really hard to document and tease apart. Just the combinatorics of it. There are thousands of microbes. The other thing I'll say that I think part of why this has taken center stage lately is COVID. There's a lot of work done in tracking COVID through sewage systems in 2021 and 2022 and then in 2020 that opened people's eyes to the value of gut health from a public health perspective. And the natural extension of that is now making that personal health. And you see that with air quality monitors, right? Like air quality used to be something that you measured at the city level. And now you have personal air quality monitors for your home.
Most corporate wellness programs overwhelm employees with too much, or they offer too little to be useful. Alively gets it right. We start with each employee's data and goals, then serve one clear, personalized action at a time. No noise, just real behavioral change. The outcome? A healthier, happier workforce, a measurable impact for your business. Visit alively.com to see personalized wellness in action.
People are used to blood work. And so you go to your doctor once a year, you pull the blood, and it would be more rare, more invasive, like because you're having to catch your poop and mail it off and put it in these scoops. Like that was a rare thing. But if you think about our daily activity, we're not constantly opening ourselves up with blood spurting out each day, but we are constantly having this waste leave our body that is giving these signals. So was there something that developed technologically that enabled us to take that insight and bring it into the privacy of our home and ultimately our bathroom?
Absolutely. So there's a few elements for this. The first is computer vision has finally gotten to a place really in the last 5 years where you could extract useful health information from image content of the toilet bowl. And it's the same thing. my mom's patients sending her pictures of their poop and asking, am I okay? You can now train an AI to analyze that poop and give you similar answers. That is something that just was not feasible 5 years ago. That's the biggest unlock. However, there's a couple other really just like amazing things to me. The first is the cultural unlock, which is going back to the conversation about gut health is more topical than ever. If you look at the Google search trends for gut health versus sleep health, in the last 4 years, gut health has surpassed sleep health as a search trend.
Okay.
So there's a cultural aspect of this. And then the other big technological one is more on the urinary side. This, again, AI, the things that are empowered by AI, you can't predict the use cases, but you can look back and make sense of it in hindsight. And one of my favorite examples is we started using kind of the modern toilet with water in it for the explicit purpose of masking the smell, right? We're trapping scents. That's why the stool falls into the toilet and gets covered by water to trap that scent in so it doesn't, fill up the whole home. As fate would have it, urinary flow rate is it is the primary metric for measuring prostate health in men. And your urinary flow rate maps 1-to-1. It is directly correlated to the volume of the pee stream entering the water bowl. So it's just like this happy fluke of history that we have water in bowls to drop our waste into, and that if you put a microphone there, you can actually measure the urinary flow rate with astonishing accuracy.
It's a funny thing on how innovation works. There's a book, How Innovation Works, and it talks about you don't know the winding path to get there. So like to invent computers, they don't use vacuum tubes today, but the path to get there did. And you needed vacuum tubes to be used in TVs and these other things. And so like nobody going back looking at a Mac today would be like, oh, you know what? Like on the path from horses and carriages to the MacBook, we need vacuum tubes. Like you couldn't figure, but it's these steps along the way of, oh, we need water in the toilet. Like we thought it was for this reason, but now because it's there, we can use it for this other really insightful, impactful reason. It's the innovation unlocks. It's serendipitous a lot of times.
Completely. There are cultures around the world, famously Germany and parts of Austria, where they have toilets they're called the poop shelf toilet, where you poop on a shelf so you can turn around and look at it. It doesn't fall into water, which is an interesting cultural comment in and of itself, right? That there are whole cultures that appreciate the value of waste inspection, and that was the topic of my TED Talk, was the value of looking at your poop throughout the ages. But in those cultures where those toilets are shaped that way, you cannot measure urinary flow rate from a microphone.
Yeah, I mean, you referenced a TED Talk. What was it? It wasn't the minister. It was, what did Henry VIII have? What was the title?
Opening line was talking about the history of waste inspection, and the King Henry's the Seventh and King Henry VIII both had members of the royal court known as the groom of the stool, whose whole job was to look at the king's poop and go tell the royal doctor about the king's health.
Because it's a window into our health, right? Like the eyes are the window to the stool, or poops is the window to our health, right?
Yeah.
So these are early days, right? Like I'm sure as technology develops, as AI gets better and everything, you can keep layering on. But today, what is it that you're able to measure in the insights that someone's able to get at home? So you think about, I'm just so excited where this is going. Like if we go back, and sure, I had a bad rap for good reason, but Theranos of like, hey, you don't have to give all this blood. We can do it from this pinprick. But that doesn't mean the idea wasn't right and wouldn't eventually come. And we think what you had to do not that long ago for a colonoscopy, how you had to go in, you got put under, they do all these things. And now you can do them at home, right? Because the tests and the innovations moved. And so where are we today in terms of the insight that like, hey, daily, I can get this and track over time. What am I able to see and do?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So on the gut health side, your stool frequency and your stool consistency, like the shape of it, those together comprise what we call the digestive pattern. And so looking at that pattern over the past week, month, 90-day period tells you a lot about how your gut health is functioning, like the functional gut health, right? And it's actually very useful in identifying dietary intolerances, trigger foods. You know, 30 million Americans have IBS, and IBS is a incredibly frustrating disease for people because unlike all, typically when people think of receiving a diagnosis for something, they think, okay, great, that's the first step towards finding relief, right? And does not work that way.
It's saying we don't know. It's saying you got something going on, but we don't know why.
It's a description of symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And what brings one person with IBS relief is completely different than what might bring their sibling with IBS relief.
Yeah.
And finding out how your body responds to different stimuli, particularly in your diet, is a really shockingly painful and frustrating process for people because you have basically two options. The first option is people often work with dietitians and nutritionists. And by the way, this typically is like, third, fourth.
Yeah. Years into the journey. Yeah.
Exactly. They work with the GI first. Often medication doesn't resolve it. And then they get stuck with this diagnosis. And then they start working with kind of more naturopathic sources and holistic health practitioners. And oftentimes the dietitians and nutritionists will ask their clients or patients to keep a manual stool log and a manual food log. And then they'll just eyeball it, which is pretty crude when you think about it, right? And they'll look at it and be like, okay, well, it looks like when you have coffee on an empty stomach or eat cruciferous vegetables or eat foods with red 40, whatever it is. Like these are the patterns that we're seeing that tend to be associated with loose or liquid bowel movements, which means your body is rejecting this food or this ingredient or has inflammation. But you have to keep a manual log of all of your bowel movements and all of the food that you eat. That is tedious. And people don't like doing that.
No. And when they do it, they don't fully do it. Like there's been studies on that, right? You're undercounting, underreporting. You don't remember the snacks here and there. Yeah.
And that's food, which people are, much more familiar with than gauging the health of their poop.
Yeah.
And then the alternative is going on an elimination diet, which is kind of the gold standard, where you basically go down to a hyper restricted diet of, what my mom calls beige foods, right? Like potatoes, chicken breast without the skin on it. And then you slowly reintroduce foods and food groups into your diet over the course of 2 weeks at a time. And then you move on to the next one. And then in the hundreds of people I have met along this journey who have gone through gut health journeys, I have met, I think, 2 people who had the discipline to stick within an elimination diet long enough to identify the actual cause of their digestive discomfort.
Yeah. There's a massive gap theory to practice, right? Like theoretically, this is the perfect path, but if nobody does it, practically it means it's worthless.
Totally. And so one of the things that we're really excited about is giving people the ability, first with rudimentary tools, just to be able to go back and look at their patterns and be able to make those mental connections themselves, right? Like this is something that Whoop and Aura users, the number one behavior that they change after using Whoop or Aura for a while.
Can I guess?
Please, you know it.
Cut down on alcohol because they see what it does to their sleep.
Exactly. And their recovery.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And I have dozens of friends who wear these, and I love, quizzing them about their experiences with these devices. And almost none of them put that data into the app, but they can go back and eyeball it, right? None of them are going back and saying and putting in the tags like I drink alcohol,
3 drinks. Last one was at 11 p.m. And yeah.
No one's doing that. Yeah. But when you drank, and you can go back and make those correlations in your own data yourself and be able to be like, oh, wow, that really is shockingly impactful. Same thing with diet. Just having an accurate history of your digestive patterns gives you the ability to go back and be like, okay, what did I eat on that day? And then the step we're going to take that I'm really excited about is asking you retroactively, hey, it looks like you had, loose or liquid bowel movements. What did you eat in the previous eating window, right? Your diet. And that's a whole other conversation about how long digestive transit time is. But for most people, it's on the order of 24 to 36 hours. So we can ask, what did you eat in your previous digestive transit time window?
Okay, so the window isn't the previous meal. It's a period of time typically.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool science on this, but it's interesting. Most people's digestive transit time is about 1 day or 2 days. And it's a bimodal distribution. but it's also highly personal. And some people, it's as low as 10 hours. And for others, it's as high as like 72.
Okay. And you can pick that up over time based on, hey, it's, 40 hours ago, you've consistently had this thing. And so it's not necessarily your 24-hour. You seem to be like the 40-hour that's impacted because of.
The most precise way we can gauge this, and I've done it myself a few times, is what they call the blue dye test, which is eat food with blue dye in it. You can see it when it comes out the other side. So you just start a timer when you eat the food. And when we first moved into our office, we had a little office warming party and had blue dye food cookies for our blue food coloring cookies for everyone. And we encouraged everyone,
track it.
Text us tomorrow or the next day when you notice this pass. Like, we're just curious to see, what's this look like for the attendees of the party. And it's a shockingly fun party trick.
Yeah. What was the range just within your own company? What was the range there?
So actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but within our own company, it mostly hovered around a day, which is what you'd expect for people with healthy digestive patterns. However, especially like a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s, right, because your gut motility starts to slow down as you get older. So as you age, the average digestive transit time gets longer and longer. That said, we found that some people had shockingly low digestive transit times, like on this order of like 8-10 hours, which is like the very low end in literature. And it raises a question for me around our understanding of digestive transit time and the literature surrounding it, because so much literature is constrained to researchers' working hours. And we had people eating these cookies at like 10 p.m. And if their bowel circadian rhythm has them waking up and their next bowel movement is at like 7 or 8 a.m., and for some of those people, they had already processed the cookie and it showed up. And I don't know that there's been that much literature around people's digestive transit times when they eat late at night.
I wonder too if ingredients matter, if there are different intolerances that would make your body processing like, hey, we need to get this out of your system faster, whether it's the dye itself or it's the gluten, or depending on what your own dietary restrictions might be.
Totally. So at any rate, so going back to your larger question, what can you track and what are the benefits, right? So one of it is just your digestive pattern, frequency, consistency, how often are you pooping, what's it look like, is it hard, healthy, loose, or liquid? The next one is what we call bathroom habits, which is this is completely within your control for the most part, which is how long you're sitting on the toilet. And there is a lot of literature and guidance around this. You're not supposed to sit on the toilet for more than 10 minutes. Smartphone use on the toilet is associated with a 46% increase in the risk of hemorrhoids. And that's something that we can help you right then and there on that in the moment, tell you how long you're sitting on the toilet. Exactly. We can give you a nudge after 10 minutes and say, hey, if this isn't working, it might be, prudent to come back later. And we can also measure the time to your first evacuation, which is helpful because that's a proxy for how much you're straining if you're constipated, right? If you sit on the toilet, what we want is to have a healthy bowel movement within like 2 minutes of sitting on the toilet, because otherwise you're training your body that you want to train your body that when you sit on the toilet, it is time to go. And if you don't, then you're training your body to sit there and strain, right?
There are a lot of parallels with sleeping, right? Where they say, hey, use your bedroom for sleeping and sex. Don't sit there and text and work and all that. Like, you want to associate it with this thing that you get in and out for.
Yes, there are so many parallels with sleeping. And same thing, like how long you sit on the toilet after you're done. We can, that's called the wrap up time. And we can measure that as well. And so we can give you, your trends on that. And again, like, are you sitting there for 15 minutes scrolling on your phone, just passing time? Like, there are more comfortable places to do that that won't put undue stress on your anal rectal muscles and blood vessels. So that's a whole category. And then there's hydration, which is, that's obviously impactful to everyone. And it has, not only impacts your cognition, your mood, mental clarity, but also has genuine life-saving potential in the statistical sense that as you age, your thirst response becomes diminished. You're less aware of being thirsty. This is something Peter Attia has talked about. He himself took a dehydration-related fall and has gone pretty deep on this subject. But the number one cause of accidental death in adults over 65 is complications due to accidental falls. And chronic dehydration, a study the Mayo Clinic ran in 65,000 people. Actually, it might be 30,000 people. Anyways, tens of thousands of people found that chronic dehydration has a 13% elevated odds ratio for taking an accidental fall. And so there are a lot of older adults. Like, I have lost people I love in my life due to accidental falls. And it's just so, like, I think most people I know have lost a loved one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so common that it's one of those things at scale. This will absolutely save lives. We just won't be able to point to that person and say, I saved your life because I helped you drink 8 ounces of water in that day. But it doesn't make it any less meaningful.
I mean, it's Steven Pinker and Bill Gates, others talk about, like, you don't get the headlines on 8 million people didn't die today because of this thing. It's very hard to track that, but you could see it over time in metadata, and it's hard to isolate the factor. But I guess this always brings up an interesting question for me with wearables, with data devices of, hey, we're surfacing these insights. And then what have you been able to see people then be able to do with that to change? So they see that hydration and say, okay, like, I'm going to be more thoughtful, and I'm going to start each morning drinking a 12-ounce glass of water. So, like, I just at least set my baseline. Like, that's this habit thing I'm going to adopt to address. Are there certain actions that you see have been able to have trackable impact once people start seeing this data?
Diet's the easiest one, right? For gut health, it's changing your diet, and particularly, avoiding ultra processed foods. One of our beta users, is probably my favorite story to date, is he had this device for months and didn't install it. And finally, his girlfriend was like, dude, like, what is this box that you've had on your desk for 2 months now? He's like, it's a Throne thing. And she was like, your gut health is terrible. Like, you need to try this. And so he got on, downloaded the app, and within a couple days, the gut health score, which is like a composite score that we give, that basically factors in your stool frequency and consistency of that digestive pattern, just synthesizes it into one pithy number. His gut health score was like in the 50s. And he was like, within 2 months of using this device, like, he was like, I saw that number. It was very motivating. Within 2 months of using this device, I was back up into like averaging in like the high 70s, and like I was scraping 90, a couple times. And he was like, and the biggest thing was I started eating healthier, and it was incredibly motivating to me between this and my Whoop to go to the gym. And those two numbers together, like, and materially improved my quality of life. And like, that is so cool, because that was a beta device, right? Like, that's amazing to me. And that's the worst it will ever be. So that's a really fun example. For me personally, the most interesting lessons I've had from using this device is the number one driver of my own personal gut health is stress. On stressful days, like, we all have stressful days, but like, especially as a founder, some of the most stressful days of the founder journey, like, have absolutely wrecked my gut health.
Did you know that before you had this data?
No.
Yeah, because I was blind to it, because as someone, like, I've worked with the nutritionist, I've done all the logging, I've done all these things, right? And my mom had colon cancer in her 40s, right? So this is a thing I take very seriously and care a lot about. And it wasn't until someone said, yeah, I get that you ate the same thing here to here, but did you notice your stress this day? Like, do you remember what you were doing that day and why that may be like, I always thought it was just the food. And so that's, amazing.
It blew my mind. For me, it was, I had a team member leave one day, and like, that absolutely wreaked havoc on my gut. And then, recovered from that, and a few months go by, and then I went out to go fundraise. For the 3 months I was fundraising, my gut health was all over the map. And then we closed the round, and immediately I got back to like once a day healthy bowel movements. And that is so, you hear about the brain gut axis, mind gut axis. It's very topical. There's all sorts of great talks and articles about it. It is one thing to know this exists in theory, and a totally different thing to see it in your own data.
Yeah.
Be able to say, to your point, I haven't changed a thing about my diet. I eat I'm very much a, food is function type person. I eat the same thing 6 days a week. And for the change to be that dramatic just based on my, fight or flight response,
Yeah.
eye-opening.
That's amazing. I am excited to see the number of lives improved with stuff like this. I mean, you talked about the 30 million people with IBS. I honestly believe there's massive underreporting in this space. So you talk about your mother's patients would send pictures. And I think you have to get to a certain age where I don't give an F anymore that I'm sending people pictures of my poop. And I think there's a lot of people not in that age that they just hide it. This is normal, especially guys. Like, I'm not going to talk about all this. But having this in your home, it's just your privacy. You figure, and you can start acting on it. And I think it's really going to impact so many more people than anybody realizes right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's something we talk a lot about, is this concept of finding your normal. Because what's normal for you and what's healthy for you is highly unique. And a lot of people don't even realize that they are not normal.
Yeah.
And, the medical literature says that pooping anywhere from 3 times a week to 3 times a day is healthy.
That's a 7x range. That's pretty
good. Yeah. Wild range.
Yeah.
But so much of it is diet dependent, right? Like, this is something that's very well documented. People with high fiber, typically, vegan diets, poop more. Then, I'm in Austin, Texas. There's a lot of carnivores here. That's a fad. That's a trend. There's cowboys. Like, a totally different diet. And how your body processes it is naturally going to be very different, even if they have similar caloric values. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect of it too is, your personal normal. If you are a 3 times a day person and then you go to once every 3 days, that's not normal. Even though it's all within the well-defined medical literature, a shift in that frequency is worth flagging.
I mean, this is something I try to encourage a lot of people on with hormone changes, right? Tracking your hormones, that if you only go once you start having problems, you don't know what your normal is. And so the earlier you can start tracking, like if you get a baseline panel at 18, 19, 20 and track over time, and it's similar with gut health of don't wait till you start having these gut problems. Like pop this in, get going, start tracking the data so that you can see when something goes amiss, because it may happen over time. It might not be an overnight thing, but it still could be a serious negative impact to your health and your quality of life. So Scott, I understand you are taking pre-orders now. And when's the launch?
Yeah, so we are shipping our first mass production units. Our proper launch is looking like 3rd week of January 2026.
All right, the 2026, the year of gut health, gut insight, gut data. And if people want to learn more about you, about Throne, what's the best place?
ThroneScience.com is our website. You can find us on every social media platform, just Throne Science. And then I'm Scott Hickle.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you diving into all things waste and toilets today. I hopefully our listeners find as much value from it as I did. I really learned a lot, and I'm excited, especially from how impactful and insightful it is now. And to your point of, this is the worst it's ever going to be. Like, it's only getting better from here. So it's really exciting. So thank you, Scott.
Andrew, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.